Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. This is News and Views with me, Julie Ali. And next online, we're having a Zoom interview. 3 other people joining me on the show. And they are almost, when I was reading these reports, I kind of thought that this was sensationalism, that this can't be true, this can't be happening in South Africa. And as the stories progressed and I read some more, um, the nickel dropped. And I started connecting the dots. And as the interview progresses, I'm more than certain you are going to be of a similar view. So I have 3 journalists online. They are Aron, Hyman, Graeme, Hosken, whom I'm sure I have talked with before, and Tankiso, Makhetha. They're all with Times live investigations with the Sunday Times. These stories were filed with the Sunday Times. And I'll just give you some of the headlines. South African IS crisis, why it's so hard to track money going from South Africa to IS, Islamic State, obviously. And then Ethiopian community lives in fear as IS murders mount. Another headline, how 6 billion rand, not 6 million guys, 6 billion rands got from sponsor shops to African territories. Okay, let's get to the heart of the matter. Very good morning to all of you guys. Welcome to the show.
Many thanks for having us.
Good morning, and good morning to your listeners.
All right. People reading the story, whilst I started reading it, I thought it was sensationalism. And I kind of wondered, where are you guys at? Why have you filed the story? How much of it is fact, and how much of the story is bordering on sensationalism? Very particularly when we look at the amounts that we talked about here, 6 billion rands from spaza shops, not large corporates, spaza shops going to fund African terrorists. So who would like to come in and respond to my first question or my first statement?
I'll jump in if you don't mind. So how this story came about was we actually have to go back to when we were working on another investigation on kidnappings for ransom in South Africa, and that was back in February. And from that investigation, we picked up information on kidnappings, organized crime syndicates with links to the Islamic State were using ransoms, money that they collected from kidnapping victims to fund various operations we discovered in Mozambique, in northern Mozambique, and elsewhere in Africa. So then we began slowly but surely chipping away to find out, is there a link between the Islamic State and other affiliates and extremist organizations and organized crime in South Africa? And that subsequently led to our investigation, which we're now talking about. And that investigation showed various factors. I mean, we interviewed communities who've been at the forefront of reprisals for speaking out against the Islamic State here in South Africa. The Oromo community, in particular, Ethiopian community. And then we also started looking at, the type of financing and sources that we spoke to in crime intelligence, in the Hawks, and various other security agencies revealed to us that there's a major security concern around the financing of terrorism from South Africa, where the country is both used as a source to generate finances and as a conduit. And one of the things that we came across was the use of TPPs, that's third-party payment providers, who operate in the informal sector, be it retailers. We're not only talking small spaza shops, but convenience stores as well, retail stores that have links into various townships, and also CBDs in South Africa. And
okay. All right. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of background noise from, I don't know, Aron, is it from your side, or Graeme, is it from your side?
But it's our side, unfortunately, at the moment. So we're just going to
try and close the door, do something.
Yeah, we're going to we're going to
Okay,
now.
good. You talk about the triple P's transactions, and I'm just kind of wondering, was those type of facilities sophisticated enough to enable these large sums of money to go through? That's one question. The other issue also, and what is very disconcerting for me as a third generation South African, is I'm very in touch with my community, the Muslim community in South Africa, third generation. My forefathers came from India. And in our circles, this is the first time something like this is surfacing. But when I carried on with your article, the suggestion then is it's not in this particular community, the Indian Muslim community. It is more the African, possibly African Muslim community, like your Somalians, like your Ethiopians, etc. Why do you suppose it is so rife in those communities? And during your investigations, Aron, let me get you to respond to this. During your investigations, was there any suggestion that the Indian Muslim community are in any way or form involved in this at all?
Julie, it's a very good question, because it's one that we pondered on greatly when we were doing this investigation. It's to say it's a community that is involved in this, I think would be wrong. It's specific individuals within these communities. So I put out a Twitter thread the other day just on this topic. It's not that ISIS has placed cells in South Africa per se. It's that there are ISIS sympathizers in South Africa from various demographics. I mean, if you look at the Dalvicio case in KZN, that is a person of Italian descent, for example. So it is extremism that comes from a few individuals, and they align themselves. And I think the bigger thing to point out here is that you have ISIS flavored organized crime. So you've got organized crime individuals seeking the affections of ISIS. There are several reasons for why they might want to do that, because they could expand into the ISIS smuggling networks, and ISIS terrorism uses the same networks that organized crime uses. So there are individuals from the Indian Muslim community. There are individuals from the African community. There are individuals in townships like Soweto who we've seen chatter about being drawn into this sort of stuff. So I wouldn't say that we didn't even call it Islamic terrorism as other publications have overseas, because we don't see it as that. It has very much an organized crime face to it, and you can imagine the types of individuals who are involved in this. Some of them are far gone, and they have various reasons for getting involved in this sort of stuff.
Okay, I'm going to put questions, and whoever feel that they can respond to it, instead of me saying Graeme or Aron or Tankiso, but this one is particularly targeted at you, Tankiso. Organized crime, huge in South Africa and all around the world. What does the picture look like when we're talking organized crime and that link to ISIS or IS? When you talk organized crime, I'm thinking prostitution, drug trafficking, human trafficking, all of those very heinous crimes. And you kind of wonder, people who are IS sympathizers, fighting some cause in their minds, which is very noble, a very idealistic cause, how could they then become involved in such heinous crime to fund ISIS? It doesn't match. Your thoughts, Tankiso?
Thanks for the question, Julie. As Graeme mentioned earlier on, that the story was a spin-off from the kidnapping story that we did, or rather published in February. What we came to realize with that project is that organized crime is not necessarily actually it is the backbone for IS financial activities, so to speak. So the sort of crimes that we came across were, smuggling of gold, smuggling of drugs, smuggling of weapons, and obviously money as well being transferred to various countries across Africa. So essentially, what we got is that organized crime is a big factor in funding IS organizations, and as Aron mentioned, that it's not necessarily entire communities that are involved in harboring IS or terrorist organization affiliates.
Okay, so these individuals that are, playing out in this space, you guys have been working hard on the story since February this year. There also seems to be a suggestion that it's linked to the spate of kidnappings that have been happening all around the country. We also know that several individuals have been, they've been caught and they've been locked up, and the cases are now pending regarding this kidnappings. Does that say that those individuals might possibly have links to organized crime and to ISIS? And then how did you guys go about connecting the dots and ascertain that the monies is in fact going into the ISIS coffers? I presume for you to make those claims and publish a story like this is you have evidence in black and white.
So in terms of your second question, I mean, we sat for months interviewing sources within the security services in South Africa, sources who worked in various organizations looking into extremism overall. And then we then obviously came across, or we were informed about a bigger investigation that is underway involving the Kenyan authorities. So, and they were looking into companies here in South Africa that have been, whose systems, financial systems and systems in which payments are made had literally or basically been hijacked, for want of a better word, and were being used to then send money to organizations and or to people linked to organizations like the Islamic State. I mean, we went and spoke to some of these third-party payment providers and said to them, look, this is what we're hearing, what can you tell us? And they basically outlined and gave us documentary evidence on how their systems, they would be used by businesses, which turned out to be, some of them turned out to be fronts, be it small cell phone shops, cell phone repair shops, etc. And, they would basically be doing a small turnover every single month. And that turnover, some businesses jump from a few million up to $1 billion in 1 month. So immediately, that raises red flags. The people that we spoke to were interviewed by the Financial Intelligence Center, who had here in South Africa, who in turn had been alerted by the Kenyan authorities and other international authorities, saying, look, there's potential money laundering going on here that's going to people linked to extremist organizations like the Islamic State.
Guys, I need a couple of hours with you guys to unpack the story. It is so deep. We only have a half an hour left. We'll try and probably steal a few more minutes thereafter. We need to go for an ad break. But what I also want to uncover when we come back, whoops, you need to cut out that noise. When we come back, I want to look at the repatriation of supposed ISIS sympathizers or South Africans that went to help the ISIS war in Syria. Apparently, the South African government is assisting them to come back into the country, giving them new identity documentations and resettling them in the country. How serious a situation is that? Where and how closely are the authorities working with you on this investigation? Are we hoping to see any prosecutions? And a whole lot more right after the break. Please stay with us.
Sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness. And every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
For a long time, we've lived in a centralized world, where institutions held the all-important data and confirmed all transactions. Those times are over. Welcome to Libertas Group, a blockchain development company boasting an ecosystem that continually redefines the way we do business. Our blockchain is decentralized, making it immune to hacking or alteration, putting the power back in your hands with no middleman so you can focus on the growth of your business. Libertas, the simplest investment choice you'll make.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
"9:38 exactly. Welcome back. We are unpacking South Africa's Islamic State crisis with journalists Aron, Hyman, Graeme, Hosken, and Tankiso Makhetha. That all with the Sunday Times, and this is indeed a shocking story. I did think it was bordering on sensationalism. How do you guys respond to that?
Well, Judy, if I could go back to an earlier question that you asked, where we're connecting the dots, just to give you an idea of how we got to this. Because at first, it also seemed to us that when we were investigating the kidnappings for ransom thing, and your listeners will remember, they'll remember some of the major kidnappings that we had last year.
Yes.
With the Morty kids, and there was the Mayfair kidnapping.
Right.
We saw that among the groups that we were looking at, and it's you could call it an ecosystem of organized crime. There was a specific group called the Klip River ISIS cell, and we thought, okay, this is interesting. We never elaborated on that in our previous reporting on the kidnapping for ransom. We thought we'd investigate it a little bit first. Obviously, they had the black standard, the ISIS flag there. They had a variety of firearms, about 11 firearms, if I can remember correctly. Bunch of military regalia and bullets and things like that. And we started looking at that. Police had started connecting several kidnappings to them, and they eventually did make a raid where they arrested these individuals. And among the individuals they arrested were people who they found out had gone to ISIS in Syria and who had trained with ISIS in Syria. And naturally, as you know, the people of Syria from all sides of that civil war fought ISIS. They fought Daesh, the way that they call them over there, and they defeated them. And some of these people were repatriated, and I'll let my colleagues respond to the repatriation of those individuals. And some of them formed sort of the basis of this kidnapping cell. And these people were kidnapping Ethiopian nationals, allegedly. One of them was convicted after one of the other accused turned against him in the court case. And some of them were linked to alleged kidnapping for ransom cases in KwaZulu-Natal. And I think you'll remember the case against Farad Huma in KwaZulu-Natal, and he was arrested twice. Both times, I think, in the second time the warrant was invalid. The first time, the police simply took too long with the case, and it was temporarily removed from the roll. So that's sort of how we started making the links. But to answer your question, it's not that Islamic State has been responsible for all of these kidnappings. The cells that we saw are just part of the bigger organized crime ecosystem there. And you have to wonder whether they had religious motivations. I don't think so, because some of the some of the Muslim people who I spoke with and who are sources of mine, went at great lengths to explain to me that these are thugs. These aren't people who, if they had read the Quran, they would not be doing these sorts of things. And from the correspondences that we could see, they act like thieves, not like people with religious motivations.
So they're glamorizing their image by using or supposedly working for ISIS or creating cells in the country. How active has the South African authorities, Hawks, prosecution authorities, SAPS, etc., are they working on these cases, and how big a threat do they see this as being? Graeme, earlier on you mentioned the Kenyan authorities having put up the red flag with all of those transactions going to Kenya. I also understand that they believe that the monies that went through to Kenya, that funded the blasting of that building in Kenya. So that's the one issue. Let's look at the role of the South African authorities in trying to stem this. But also, given that you guys have reported that upwards of 300 families are going to be or already being resettled in South Africa under new identities, that kind of would pose a threat, wouldn't it, to ordinary South African civilians? So where to from here then, Graeme and Tankiso?
So, in terms of the investigations that are being done by the Hawks and by crime intelligence, so these are just two units within the police that investigate counter-terrorism. I mean, they trying their best. The problem is there's very limited numbers of officials within these units who can actually investigate counter-terrorism. So these units are incredibly small. And what we discovered during our investigation with our sources, was that there's a huge repatriation that's been going on, and Tankiso will speak more to that. But the authorities within the police and the Hawks are saying to other government agencies, we've got a problem here in South Africa. We've got a problem in terms of the number of sympathizers. We've got a problem in terms of the number of people who are raising finances. The Financial Intelligence Center itself has said that there's huge concern around terrorism financing in South Africa in general. All sorts of terrorism, all sorts of extremism. And there was a report that they released in February which highlighted the concerns and why there's so many concerns. A lot of the concerns lie around the immigrant population and community here in South Africa, but also around South Africans themselves. So you've got a thing where people who've gone and fought for ISIS or supported ISIS logistically or various other means in Syria and in the caliphate or the then caliphate have been returned, who are now just being brought back into the communities. And the police that we've spoken to said, look, they've got no means to, or very few means to actually monitor these people. There's just not enough resources within the police to actually monitor them. And the cops and the sources that we spoke to say, look, there's a major problem here. There is really, and it's not like we went out looking for this investigation. I mean, this is what we discovered through months of work, looking into the kidnapping, organized crime, other forms of organized crime coming across this ISIS links here in South Africa. And the Kenyan authorities, together with their security networks, have said, look, there's a problem. There's money coming from South African businesses to fund cells terrorism in other parts of Africa, especially Central, Eastern, and Mozambique. So there's really from the authorities' perspective, a cause for concern in the country.
Tankiso, okay, and I'm also just wondering, any threats on your lives? Are your families at risk at all after the filing of these stories? Because this is really, a breaking story. it's something to be concerned about here in South Africa, given what you guys have uncovered. We're also hearing that the Ethiopian community live in fear as these murders mount. So I do know that I've thrown multiple questions at you guys, but I'm trying to cram in as much as I possibly can into the interview. Tankiso, over to you.
Okay. Firstly, Julie, in terms of the repatriation piece, about well, that system has been happening for the past 5 or 6 years, right?
Around about a little bit.
About 5 or 6 years. And what Graeme mentioned earlier on about our state organs not having enough officials to de-radicalize or manage some of these individuals that are brought back from places like Syria is that our sources told us that they'll need about 2 or 3 police officers just to watch over one individual who's returned from Syria, for example, and they don't have the capabilities or the resources for that. In addition, this repatriation has been happening with the consent or the knowledge of DIRCO, Department of International Relations and Cooperation, and they haven't said anything to us about what the plan is regarding these individuals. Department of Home Affairs hasn't responded to us, but we do understand that individuals who return from ISIS territories are not given new identity documents. Well, they're given new identity documents, but not new identities, because obviously,
okay,
yes, because they
okay.
renounced their nationalities when they left South Africa. So the Department of Home Affairs comes in to give them back their identities. So yeah, that's the
So you touched on something very important there. You touched on the fact that the authorities are under-resourced, so they can't be monitoring these individuals. And you touched on a very important word, and that is de-radicalization. If that doesn't happen, these 300 odd families are going to go on to radicalize other youth in our country. Isn't that a threat to us in South Africa?
To a certain extent, yes, it is, but we do not want to be sensationalists in that regard. We know what we know. We can't speculate about what they may or may not do up until there's evidence indicating that they have, mobilized and so forth.
And sorry to come in here. What we've also seen is as part of our investigation. I mean, we interviewed senior members of the Oromo community. This is the Ethiopian community, and they're largely based here in Gauteng, and in particular Johannesburg area. And back in 2017, I worked on an article where one of their sheikhs and imams was murdered. He was shot dead outside the main mosque in Mayfair. And what we began looking from there, interviewing, and we discovered back then that he'd been quite outspoken against the radicalization that was ongoing in his mosque, and for that he was assassinated. Once we started working on this story again, I went back to the Oromo community. I mean, that first murder happened in 2017. Went back to the Oromo community, speaking to sources that I've developed over numerous years, and I asked them, what is the situation? And they took us through for a good couple of days, saying, look, this is how many of our members have been murdered. This is how many of our members have been chased out of the community, hounded out of Gauteng, hounded out of South Africa. And I said, okay, well, but what's the reason? And we were told that every single one of those who'd been shot and killed, we're talking 4 people, 5 people, had all been incredibly outspoken against the Islamic State and against radicalization and against extremism. They were incredibly vocal. We're talking business leaders, we're talking religious leaders, imams, and they paid the price. And that price, it's there. For speaking out against the Islamic State, it's as your listeners and viewers will know, is you basically put a death warrant on yourself. And we've seen this, and it's not like the Oromo community is a Muslim community. I mean, they Muslims, and they themselves are against extremism, and they've been, as the one guy said to me, he says, slowly but surely we're being deleted.
Okay, so carry on,
Just
Tankiso.
sorry, just to get back to your previous question about our safety. Not necessarily. I don't think we are in danger per se. We haven't really received any threats.
For filing these stories, you're not concerned about your safety?
To a certain degree, we are, because you never really know who's following you if you are being followed. But to a large extent, no, we're not really that concerned.
All right, carry on.
I think, Julie, the big thing is that what we've seen and been speaking to experts, and it does seem that the individuals, if you're talking about more hardcore individuals who are trying to organize themselves and get recognition from ISIS, they are hiding in the shadows, and they are slowly taking over places, institutions. We've seen correspondences from sources that mosques on the Rand around Johannesburg are slowly being infiltrated and taken over, akin to what the Aroma community has been telling us, that there are certain imams coming in with a very radical ideology, and that people who oppose them are threatened. And you'll see these are always in communities where there are high crime levels, where the state is largely absent, where there's a relatively corrupt police service. And these are the places where, just as you saw in the collapse of statehood in Iraq, the collapse of statehood in Syria, something else comes in, it replaces it.
How worried should we be, and what is organs like, security studies, and people like them, the Hawks, NPA. And I know that you have said this, and we are aware of the fact that these people are totally under-resourced. Where to us, where to from here as South Africans? Do we look beyond our borders for support? Does Interpol play a role? Should they be playing a role here? If this situation is not contained, the mind boggles what could happen or what could play out in the next 5 or 10 years' time.
If I could just jump in there quickly, Julie. So, firstly, if you go and look at the teams that are tasked, so the Crimes Against the States team from the Hawks, and then you also have the anti-terrorism or counter-terrorism unit in the police. The Crimes Against the State team in the Western Cape has 5 investigators, one of whom investigates ISIS-related activities, 2 of whom investigate other domestic terror, like right-wing groups. So you can talk about sort of, Afrikaner right-wing groups and stuff like that. And then the rest are investigating apartheid-era crimes. So you've got very limited resources. And then secondly, just on that question, you've got, you would have seen with the, and we wrote a story about that. I interviewed Siraj Miller here in Mitchell's Plain, who was on a US Treasury. He's been sanctioned by the US Treasury. All his bank accounts and stuff have been frozen for allegations that he is sponsoring the Islamic State from Mitchell's Plain, South Africa. And you could see there that essentially the US was taking a jab at South Africa, saying, look, if you are harboring alleged terrorists, we'd be willing to bet that these 4 individuals that we have on our sanction list, we'll fight that in court. But there are many people who we know about or who we don't know about, and you guys are facilitating them in South Africa. You're facilitating financing, and you don't want to do anything about it because you're afraid of what the repercussions of that will be. You're afraid that there might be an attack in South Africa, and well, you know what? Here's the Treasury Department statement. These individuals are sanctioned. They're in South Africa. The ball's in your court, South Africa. What are you going to do? And that's the situation that we're in. ISIS, other extremist groups are looking, and they're saying, well, you've already seen 2 threats from IS Central Africa province, saying that if South Africa gets involved in the conflict in Mozambique, we will strike South African targets. They might do that in embassies in other countries. they might do that in South Africa. They might even target the civilian population in South Africa. We don't know. But that is the threat. You've seen these attacks all across the world, and you've seen it in Kenya. There's no reason to suggest why they wouldn't do it in South Africa if they have the capacity to operationalize any of their cells here.
So the other question that begs to be answered, and I know this is kind of digressing a bit, but I think there might be a link going forward. We have a very high unemployment rate in South Africa, particularly the youth. We're sitting at unacceptable numbers. They are very vulnerable. And if the authorities do not start stemming this type of crime, organized crime, which, as you guys are suggesting, has direct links with ISIS, we are going to have an upsurge in youth joining these organizations, because I guess there's so many reasons why they would do that. They'd get paid heftily, they look very glamorous in these roles, and the future then would be truly bleak for our youth and for a country as a whole. And Tankiso, I think you want to come in here.
Indeed, I do. I can understand where you're coming from in terms of the socio-economic problems that we have in South Africa, but we do need to understand, and as you said that it was a bit unrelated, but we do need to understand that the radicalization of young people into IS is actually done in mosques, not necessarily mosques, but madrasa, like imams in madrasas. So they shape the minds of young children as young as 12, between the ages of 12 and 16, and they recruit them in that regard. They indoctrinate them with ideology of IS, and that's how IS is intended to grow. So perhaps
I'm looking at the organized crime link to how you start indoctrinating people, unemployed youth on street corners, in gangs, very especially on the Cape Flats. And with organized crime, you are talking human trafficking, drug trafficking, and eventually once you have them indoctrinated, you can then very easily get them as becoming fully fledged IS members. I mean, that's just a thought. I don't know. What are you guys thinking, seeing that you've worked so long and so hard on this expose?
Look, I think it's so South Africa is as you rightly point out, you've got this big, a huge unemployment rate, especially amongst the youth. You've got people sitting on street corners, no hopes for the future. Somebody like a group like this comes along that's being infiltrated by organized crime and has got links to organized crime, and they offer an opportunity. And people see no other opportunity. They've got, say, no opportunity of furthering their education, getting a decent job, well-paying job, being able to look after themselves and their family. And if you're given an opportunity, and I think it's ripe for the picking. And I mean it then that's when the ideology starts getting spread. It's like we're doing this because this is what we believe. That's how we will look after you. We will provide for you. We will assist your family. And it's a slow process. I mean, it's like you plant a seed, and slowly over months and weeks and potentially years, that ideology starts sinking into the mind of impressionable youth, and they see it as okay, well, it's not so bad. I'm getting something out of it, And if they ask me to do a certain act, be it a hijacking, be it a kidnapping, well, it's going to pay the bills.
Okay.
So I think there's very much a risk to it.
All right. We've come to the end of the show. I will go to each one of you for your final thoughts. I've had a WhatsApp message suggesting Julie, these journalists are by and large talking rubbish. How do you guys? Right. I've had another, and I came across, I came across a tweet yesterday as well that accused you guys of sensationalism. How do you respond to that? Let's go to you one at a time. And the way forward for South Africa, if you are not talking rubbish, what about if this person then confronts you guys and wants to see the evidence, the black and white evidence? Would you be able to provide it? Graeme?
So first of all, sensationalist, absolutely not. What we've done is we've spent, as we said earlier, since February working on this story. It's based on documentary evidence. It's based on interviews with police sources. It's based on responses from the police who've said, yes, we are working with the Kenyan authorities in this global investigation into the funding of terrorism, the Islamic State, from South Africa. We can send the responses if people want to see responses and screenshots of the responses from the police. Happy to send it. We're happy to engage people. But the problem is South Africa is not immune. I think everybody needs to take their head out of the sand and realize that we're part of a global community, be it with financing, be it recruitment, be it all sorts of aspects that come with extremism. People just need to realize that there is a problem. It's a serious problem. And on the way forward, we need to be engaging. We need to be asking, questioning government. What are your policies in regards to extremism, be it Islamic, Christian extremism, right-wing extremism, left-wing extremism? What are your policies? Why are you bringing people back who've renounced their citizenship? Why are the level of prosecutions and so low? Why are the resources made available to investigate counterterrorism cases so few? And those are the questions.
And I'm just wondering, Graeme, how much of a spotlight is this story or these stories that you people have filed? Is that not going to create intense spotlight and scrutiny on the Muslim community? Tankiso, do you want to respond to that? And I'll come to you in a minute or two, Aron.
Julie, I don't think so. The authorities know exactly where the hotspots are. They know exactly who the main figures are in those hotspots. Sure, there is a low conviction rate in terms of terror-related crimes in SA. I think the Trucy twins were convicted after striking a deal with the state and pleading guilty. And I think there are 9 other people since 2010 who've been convicted for terror-related crimes. So I don't necessarily think that there is a major spotlight that's going to be shown on Islamic communities, especially on the backdrop of our stories.
Okay. Aron, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, well, I think it's clear that the Muslim community is on the front line of what's been happening here. They are the first victims of this sort of thing, and you'll see in the areas where this happens, it's areas where there are a lot of disenfranchised people. It's areas where there's low socioeconomic, or there's many socioeconomic barriers for people to uplift themselves, and these people are mostly suffering in the dark. And you've got individuals, and it's like that with any community, in the absence of authority that is recognized, that is legit. You get people who come in and impose themselves on communities violently, whether that is Islamic State, whether these are right-wingers, as you see in other countries. That's the threat to South Africa. And the authorities need to recognize that, and communities need to steel themselves against that and need to steel the youth against that.
Okay, we're going to wrap up there, and you guys are open to any member of the public making direct contact with you to explore the story even further and to view the evidence that you have to hand. Graeme? Open invitation.
Absolutely. I mean, we're willing to engage with anybody. I mean, we can, yeah, that's, and we welcome comments, we welcome criticism, positive, constructive criticism. I mean, and guidance as well. I mean, if people know stuff, let us know. I mean, you'll find us on Twitter and on our social media pages,
Oh,
and email.
okay, guys, what a story. What a story. Yeah, I've learned a lot. I'm still kind of getting my head around this. No doubt we will talk again soon. What's the next story you guys are working on, or can't you tell me now? Can't you say at the moment? All under wraps.
Yeah, pretty much under wraps at the moment.
Please shout out when you're ready with the story, because we'd love to chat again. Aron, you wanted to say something?
No, well, it won't. It will have nothing to do with the Islamic State. I can promise you that. It's a bit more bizarre, the one that I'm working on, but we'll see. It's got
Shout
a bit of a
out,
Ukraine
guys.
element to it.
Okay, shout out. We're more than happy to have you guys on here. Lovely talking to you guys.
Thank you very much.
Whether the public believes you or not, whether the public believes that you are sensationalists, whether they're hoping that this is just another platform where you could perhaps get some more exposure, I don't know. But there you have it. They can engage with you. And I do look forward to talking to all three of you sometime soon. Go well, stay safe, and God bless.
Thank you. To you too.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you indeed. 8 after 10 o'clock exactly, news and views with me, Julie Ali. And in a minute or two, I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Miriam Mukwanda, to tell us what she's unpacking on a show this morning. What do you make of that story with the 3 journalists? I'm still trying to get my head around it. Love to hear your views. You can, WhatsApp us, tweet us, whatever have you, and we'll share all of that with the rest of you on one of the forthcoming shows. Stand by. Miriam will be joining me in a minute or two.